Hello and welcome to the Empower Couples podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode, what I'm really excited about, is about wanting your partner to change versus accepting them as they are.
And I know some of you hearing that just said, yes, please, because I just wish I could be accepted more for who I am. I wish I didn't hear these remarks of wishing I was this way or wishing that I would change this. And we're going to cover a really important element of like, what is quote unquote too much to ask of each other to shift versus what's acceptable.
Yeah, because you might have gotten to a place, and in our coaching, this really comes up a lot. You know, I need my partner to change this or to stop doing these certain things. And it is a good question in the relationship coaching realm, in the personal growth realm. Mm-hmm. Where is the line between just accepting them as they are, your partner, and then you might be, again, saying that for yourself, like accepting me, this is who I am, versus actually being okay to request change. Mm-hmm. Like, where is that line? And it's such an important question. And I do think there's a difference between change, which mm-hmm. is typically when you identify, yeah, there's a pattern here, there are some habits, and it's something that we could really transform. And then there's growth, which to me is more, we're focused on getting better. Change is like something is sort of negatively impacting us. Growth is like, hey, we just want to actually get better. And then there's the acceptance that this is the way that it is. This is the way that my partner is.
Like, for example, you're never going to not be OCD.
No.
Right? Like, you're going to never...
I mean, things should just be organized. It just really needs to be.
I see him make an eye sometimes at my drawers. Like, how do you live that way?
And it's actually, though that's funny, it's not a bad thing, because then that's places that over time in our relationship, I start to tend to what? Try to get you to be a little bit more like me.
You've done a good job,
just
though.
Organize things like I would like it to be
organized.
organized.
I would say, though, like, that is one thing you haven't kind of brought up a lot to me. So I appreciate that, because you have kind of just let me be.
You just see my face.
Yeah, once in a while I see his facial expression like, what on earth do you do? So that's not something that's ever going to change. And if I were to try to make you be different, it would be like asking you to change kind of this area you're not.
Personality,
right, exactly.
Which is actually perfect where we're going, because I think that's what we need to understand first. Who is the basic person, or what is the basic personality? Mm-hmm. And understanding that if that can change, it's going to be something harder. So I'm actually kind of starting to give it away, so I'm not going to yet. But let's explore this, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited. I've been diving into this topic of the social psychology, what they call Big 5 personality traits. And it's been actually hugely successful for measurements across all kinds of different things, from jobs and careers and who fits into what kind of career and
culture,
the type of person and culture. And they really are able to bring this as a science to these 5 base personality traits.
All right, let's hear them.
Okay, yeah, great. And then you and your partner are going to have a different mix of each of these. So the Big 5, the first one is extroversion, which we're all a little bit more familiar with. It's your preference for being in social situations versus being alone, whether social interactions sort of give you energy and charge you up, or if those drain you and have you feel depleted and you'd really rather be more by yourself.
Yeah, this is one, too, that we find with couples can be a source of conflict sometimes, because one person will be in a season of, I want to spend time with friends, I want to go out, I want to be doing, hobbies and things that are exciting. And the other person's like, I don't know, I enjoy being home and keeping things simple. And I know that it can seem conflicting, or as though you need to kind of have someone lose. But we believe, and you're going to hear kind of our whole theme throughout this, is there is a way to make sure you both feel included and considered, right? But I mean, we have this sometimes where you're like, I need to be social, I need to be out. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm comfortable in my pajamas.
Yeah. This is a strong one for me. I didn't know we were going to put ourselves into the categories as of yet. I'm very high on extroversion, but I wasn't necessarily always exuding that, which is kind of going to lead us into further discussion. But let's get into the second big 5 trait, and it's a less known term of neuroticism.
Which is a funny word. Like, we're not saying, like, how neurotic are you, right?
Well, in a sense we are. Maybe we just all don't come from the exact right context. In this case, it's your disposition to experience negative emotions, or more by definition, negative effects. So to me, and I'm not an expert, but I would say it's the people that tend to be more glass half full versus people glass half empty.
Yeah, it's like the mindset. Like, is this where the worldview fits in here? Is like, do you see things more in a negative light, or do you see things more in a positive light? And also, how do you handle negative emotions? And oftentimes in a couple, there is one. So actually, to connect it to the relationship assessment that we have couples do, there is a personality element, and they call it emotionally steady in the assessment. And so it's like, usually in the relationship, there's one person that's more emotionally steady, pretty like more even keel, once in a while has an up and down emotion. And the other person can be more affected by things. And that can actually make you a great team, just so you know.
Segmenting that, I think I fall slightly lower, in this case it would be slightly higher on neuroticism than you. And this has actually been kind of seasonal. So again, not trying to give the whole point away here, but maybe because of how this year has went specifically, and with the property and the challenging things we went through financially, and what I had to do for an entire month to get that thing to work out, I do actually feel as if I'm now slightly higher on this disposition to negative experiences.
And by higher, you mean like you experience more? Okay, more negative emotions?
Yeah, and I think I'm focused more on trying to avoid bad situations or something like that. It doesn't matter. I am seeing myself as tending to be higher on neuroticism right now, and possibly in general. Maybe sort of my engineering kind of upbringing, maybe you're supposed to question things and be more skeptical. So maybe it's from that too.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to, correct me if I'm wrong, but like wake up pretty joyful.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
So in this case, you'd be lower on neuroticism.
And that's been actually, and we'll keep going, I know you're eager to share the others, but that's been one thing where we have talked, where I'll be sometimes like, come on, what about waking up joyful with me?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a place a lot of couples are falling into. Like, this is one of the main areas you're wanting your partner to change. Like, step it up. Like, get your attitude right. Stop being so negative. Well, let's move to the third personality trait here, and that's agreeableness. And this is your level of cooperation, of politeness, friendliness, being considerate of other people. And again, you can be high and low on this. For me personally, used to be very, very high on agreeableness, and I would still tend to be on the higher level of agreeableness.
Right. And that is something you can be, what they say, people pleasers, people who sacrifice themselves and then even somewhat build resentment because they aren't having their needs or wants met. So that is something to really consider too. Like, in the partnership, there is a healthy balance. Again, linking to this assessment we have couples do, there is a healthy balance of being considerate of your partner. You want to find that sweet spot, including them, but not sacrificing yourself. And in a relationship, for sure, there needs to be a willingness to cooperate and change and adjust your patterns and your habits. I'm not trying to give away later in the episode, but being cooperative, how do we make sure I'm thinking as a we? Because you aren't just an I anymore when you choose to get married.
And this will bring up a few points of conflict for couples as well, because, yeah, the idea, the desire is that when you're with a partner, they tend to be on a higher level of agreeableness with you and be a partner and be a we. And maybe that's a place to look. If you got with a partner that is inherently in their personality very low on agreeableness, which, by the way, is a good thing for a lot of different career paths. Being a salesperson, being a director, a CEO, you don't want to be high on agreeableness. You want to set your vision. You want to set your course. You want to be straight to it. You don't want to be wavering based on what other people randomly tell you. You're not here to people please. No, you're here to run your business. You're here to sell. You're here to make money. And so for successful business people and entrepreneurs, you need to be low on agreeableness. Like, that's the only way you're going to be successful in those paths.
It's interesting you say that, though, because there is a time and place for when we need to, like, draw a line in the sand. Okay, I'm not in work mode anymore. I'm home. And so even personality traits can magnify in certain environments, like your work environment. And then you have to check out, okay, do I need to be as, like, showing up the same exact way at home? Or do I need to...
Well, yeah, so you're not trying to sell your partner like you're trying to sell a car.
Right.
But, again, these are base personality traits. So when we're talking about accepting and we're talking about changing, start to understand, and you're starting to get where we're going here, I think, you're going to have to accept the base personality traits. If your partner is lower on agreeableness, don't expect that to be changing very fast.
I'd say a huge change. Yeah, and we're going to go into that.
So let's go to the fourth one, where it's conscientiousness. And conscientiousness is your awareness, really. It's, it's more the common phrase now of being conscious and being an aware person. But it's specifically that you're aware of your own thoughts, your own memories, and your feelings. And, I mean, what would be the other side of this is that you're not really considering that these are separate things, like your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your memories. You can actually kind of like put it outside and be reflective of it. The other way would be low conscientiousness is it's just all happening. Like that's just you, just all the experience that's happening within you is who you are in a way, and you're not really very aware of that those things could change.
And that's a big piece of a thriving partnership over time. You have to question your own thoughts. Okay, are these thoughts about my partner constructive? Because that little voice inside is going to sometimes chatter and say things that aren't constructive, aren't helpful. And you have to be willing to question that thought and say, is that something I want to continue to live with and see my partner that way? Or can I actually be more conscientious and shift what I'm focusing on? But you're right. With the personality, there are people who are much more self-aware. And a lot of times in the partnership, it tends to be the women. I don't know exactly why, but women do tend to be more conscientious, self-aware, and a little bit more than the men. Sorry, not trying to put down the men.
Well, if you think about this, even your question, hey, we have to be more aware, that's under the guise that someone is already high on conscientiousness. So you can't necessarily ask that of someone that's currently low on conscientiousness, right? Base personality. So let's do the fifth one so we can get even further into where this line really is. And the last one is openness. And this is your receptivity to new ideas, new experiences. And one example I was hearing, if someone, it's different than extroversion, but if someone was to come up to you and start to get into a conversation and share ideas and share new things, you're going to lean into that and you're going to engage with that as a more open person because you're receptive to hearing people's ideas and wanting to get into philosophical conversations or understand more about them. So you have this openness around new ideas and experiences and hearing from other people.
And would you say that in this openness is where things like being willing to be vulnerable come in, or like being authentic
totally.
in conversations? Yeah, so that openness piece, there are going to be people who are more transparent, open, vulnerable, and others who are more guarded, or it takes a little bit longer to have them open up or be open to an idea. Maybe they need more time to process it. So yeah, those big five are very interesting to explore.
So let's now wrap this around with this personality. So personality, as we've been talking about here, is a set of these big five traits, and we all fall onto a different degree of them. And it is pretty solid in that where you are now in life has been a construction of starting with a certain mixture of these five. However, personality is not quite as rigid and fixed as you would think, because the personality is you have these five base traits, but it's actually become a framework, a worldview, a construction over time through your life events. So, for example, like what you saw growing up, whether with your parents or with media or with other friends and their parents, then there are, as you progress through, the things that then happen to you in your own life. And again, that starts to create a certain worldview. Women are like this, relationships are like this type of business is hard, these are situations that I should avoid, right? So you start to build this sort of outlook about your life and you, the person in it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you progress into adulthood and then beyond, as you get older in adulthood, events can solidify more of that worldview.
Like confirmation bias? Is that
Yeah,
what
a
you
certain
mean?
level of confirmation bias, but even to a deeper degree, because it'll start to solidify your big 5 traits into, boom, that's where they are. If you fell on the scale of extroversion as a 7, then events could solidify, I'm an extrovert, or I'm an introvert. I'm a 1. I hate being out with people. However, there's opportunity where events could actually cause you to question and reconsider if things are as set as you thought. And when it comes to personality, it's interesting to think about, because we'll give some examples here. And actually, it's a good example for me to go, and then I'd love to hear how this has showed up for you as well.
Sure.
So in my early stages, in reality, I would have fallen on the scale of higher extroversion, for example, meaning that when I was with people, I felt more energized. However, I was also very shy. So it would have looked like to someone else that I was very introverted because I didn't speak up. And then the group of friends I had was actually the cool crowd in high school. And I wanted to fit in. I love that group. And in a sense, my agreeableness to be able to be a participant in that group also went much, much higher because I didn't want to stand out. I wanted to go with the flow, whatever people wanted to do so that I could continue to be in the group. And I didn't really speak up. It would have looked like within the group, I was kind of withdrawn and wasn't the most outgoing. So it would have looked like I was introverted. So that started to just build into my worldview over time. I'm not a very outgoing person. And then events showed up, like with trying to date and trying to talk to girls and get rejected. I built that into more of like, oh, I'm actually much more of an introvert. Not necessarily that it was true, but just notice how as much as you think your personality and your partner's personality is fixed, it starts with a certain mix, but then life events can cause you to solidify it and really think that that is who I am.
Or shift, because would you say I'm a life event that shifted it for you? Well,
sure.
I think it shifted your openness. Like your ability to be open, connected, vulnerable, share, that really evolved. Maybe because I'm that life event.
Yeah, I would say so.
Well,
actually.
and because we just pursued so much personal development. I think that adjusted it. Yeah, I love that example from me.
But I needed higher conscientiousness.
That's true.
So to be able to be more open to changing my worldview, because I have to be reflective of my own thoughts and my own emotions and my memories. And then that allowed me, I think, to be more in the openness.
You all would be shocked to have met Jocelyn prior to Aaron in previous relationships, because my personality before, part of it was actually very like I did not trust people. I especially didn't trust men, and I kind of had more of a negative outlook, and that was from multiple events, like watching my parents go through a really intense divorce, and then men not being faithful to me early on, and it built this whole worldview of I can't trust men. And I also had very low self-esteem. So Aaron, you were saying that's probably more on the like neuroticism area. Because of my worldview, I was much more affected by my partner, like my partner's emotions or response to me either made me feel better or it didn't. Like I wasn't really connected to my own emotions and power. I didn't love myself. It was all of my confidence was with my partners. And so that's something that really, really shifted, but I had to do that work and heal certain things. So I think that's an element of personality. Like if you consider yourself more of an anxious partner or someone who doesn't trust, I don't think those are things that are stuck, right? Like those are things I shifted and evolved. And again, it's like the events have to happen. So had I kept going down the same path of being with partners who had me question those things, as opposed to I picked a good partner, I picked you. So that world event changed things for me.
So let's summarize where we're at with this. So for where you are now, the age you're at, the life events that you've gone through, your mix of personality traits are going to be somewhat fixed, actually. However, from this conversation we just had, you can see that that can slightly change over time. So personality is not as rigid and fixed as you think. So there is a process by which personality actually does get constructed, meaning these changes in these big 5 traits. And how that happens is it starts with mood. So whatever your particular mood is, when you wake up a certain day, if that tends to last a little bit longer, all of a sudden, what do we call that? Oh, that's their attitude now. If you maintain an attitude for a longer period of time, all of a sudden that will become, a tendency. Oh, that person is a little bit more like this. And the longer that those tendencies go on, we'd say, oh, that's just how they are. So that's your personality. So your personality is not as fixed as, oh, that's who I am. It's actually constructed over this process of determining your mood, your attitude, becoming your tendencies, and then your personality. So to finally answer the question of this episode, where the line is you should accept the personality traits and change the attitude, or, as we'll go more into here right now, the attitude-driven behaviors of your partner.
What's an example of attitude then?
Yeah, so this is a great example. So if you notice, as you progress throughout your day, right, there's a certain mood you might have. Now, it's going to be different than your personality. Maybe you wake up and now you're starting to just have a overall negative sort of mood, right? If that lasts for a few days, that's going to be an overall, you're just kind of a negative attitude, which would be like a tendency and turn into a personality. And that personality trait would now seem like a very high level of neuroticism. Mm-hmm. But again, it started from a mood and then switching into an attitude. And then the attitude is going to drive certain behaviors. Mm-hmm. So you could wake up and be kind of negative and be checked out, for a couple of days, and then that's going to have you act towards your partner in a certain way. If that goes for a long period of time, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's just how I am now, right? I'm skeptical about life. I'm, always questioning my partner. So where we want to draw the line is really before any of these moods and attitudes go too long to turn into personality traits that are not going to serve the relationship. So again, you can change personality traits over time through this process. However, that's where we would say that you would draw the line for accepting and actually requesting for change. You can't necessarily come to your partner and say, I need you to change the personality that you are now, because that's going to be a longer time period. It can happen. That person's going to have to be very open to it, understand what the impact has been, and say, you know what, I do want to go down that path of really altering my mood, over time the attitude, my tendencies, and then overall my personality. So you can move your traits, some over time. However, that's a bigger ask.
Can you think of examples from recent sessions or couples where you see a distinction between their personality and their mood or attitude?
Yeah. So how about being sharp and critical of your partner because you do not feel loved recently? So you might have a low love account, which is what we talked about last week. So your overall mood now towards your partner in the short term, because you weren't getting the love deposits, is going to have you feel less loved. Now that mood is going to drive, or as we're saying here, those attitude-driven behaviors are going to have you be a little bit more avoiding of conversations. You'll be distant, from each other. You might not be as willing to initiate the repair, to initiate connection with your partner, and you might be in a longer hangover, right? So those would be attitudes and behaviors driven from those attitudes, and that is a perfectly acceptable way to ask for change.
Tell me, Aaron, what you think about this one, but I was thinking back to a past relationship that I had where the person always was telling me they wish I was funnier and fun is the way they would describe it. And I would just constantly feel like I'm not the person that cracks jokes. That isn't me. I'm a lighthearted person, right? I wake up joyful, but I'm not a outwardly, making people laugh. And I'm not the person at the party that's like, getting a lot of attention and dancing and being that way. So is that him asking me to change a personality trait then that's more fixed?
Yeah, for sure.
Then what about if I was just more, I woke up more down and he was just asking me to be more joyful?
Yeah.
Is that more the attitude and the mood?
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And again, you want to be able to request the changes in attitude and attitude-driven behavior, because if that goes on too long, all of a sudden your partner will develop into someone different. Because those over time will adjust your own overall personality. And then that's a harder ask, because when you're asking your partner to change something that's really basic to who they are, their personality, they're going to get very defensive, because like, well, that's who I am. You need to accept that. And that's where this line, I think, really needs to be drawn, so that you don't get into these positions where you're saying to each other, you're not the person I married, or you need to change. And, well, how can I? You don't accept me for who I am. That's just who I am. You have to accept me or this isn't going to work. Right? So that, to me, is the line. Again, what we're saying is you do have the ability over a longer period of time, through consistent focus, mood, attitude, tendency, into being able to change personality traits. But again, that's going to be a harder thing to ask of your partner now. So it's not manipulation, but actually what you're saying is, all right, what are our current moods or attitudes, and making requests for changes around those. Or, hey, I can see that a certain attitude we've had towards each other is from having a low love account. We've been more critical with one another. There's probably things that we haven't repaired. Or let's say, for another example, you're trying to force your partner to talk when you want to and when you're ready, right? That might be because you're higher on the openness, where your partner is lower on openness. So they're not as readily available to new ideas, to new ways of seeing things. So that's going to be a harder thing to say, like, hey, when we get into conflict, you got to stay with me. Don't leave the conversation. You keep on talking to them, and you get the pursue, withdraw, then dynamic, right?
Yes, definitely hear you on that dynamic. And I can imagine some of you listening are actually coming from the place of, my partner has told me they wish I would adjust this. And you're asking yourself, can I change that? I think a place to look is, how do you show up in other places? So kind of step outside the partnership in the home environment, at work or with your friends. If you show up really fun and joyful and outgoing there, then you're capable of that. So if you say, like, this is just who I am, but really that's the only way, you're only like that at home, then really that isn't something that is fixed. So that's a good question to ask yourself. Why do I show up different at home? Environment could play a part.
That would be a very mood and attitude driven behavior, very similar, because whether it's deposits or you feel like your partner's been more critical of you, exactly right. The actions with inside of the partnership are creating a different atmosphere, a mood and attitude, not a change in personality. Because you're right. How am I as a base personality out with friends and with relatives and with coworkers?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a great distinction. Anything else that you think would be helpful for the listeners related to changing personality versus accepting them? And I think actually we didn't speak maybe enough to the acceptance piece. Is acceptance different than kind of just resigning yourself to, oh, I'm going to have to tolerate them for decades, right? Acceptance isn't that.
I see it personally as a more short-term thing.
Okay.
Because based on what we're saying here, the personality traits can be altered, but it takes longer time horizon. So it's not as right for you to ask for changes there. But, okay, going based on what we're saying, if that does change over time, going back to what I said before, it's not a manipulation, but if you are looking to change some more fundamental aspects of a partner's personality or your own, it does start with the short-term changes in mood, attitude, and then attitude-driven behaviors. So that's where you want to make the requests on those, and then you accept the longer-term transformation.
Yeah, like looking at a longer period of time. And I think too, when it comes to you and I and accepting each other as we are, we definitely focus on the longer term. But also we focus more on ourselves. How do I want to show up today? What are the choices I want to make that benefit our partnership, right? We're still thinking as a we, but like, I don't wake up less joyful because you tend to have more of a disposition of like being neutral and kind of quiet and reflective in the mornings. So it's not like I change myself because of you. Like, we still show up with our personalities, and we are careful about the amount of remarks and things that we say. Like, it wouldn't be a very comfortable environment if we were, making remarks like, "Oh, you just care too much about where stuff goes. Like, why are you like that? Or can't you just be more like fun and lighthearted?" That wouldn't be a very empowering environment. So I think acceptance is also more of just loving them as they are, and like focusing on what you appreciate about them and how that actually makes you a better team.
Yeah. And for example, on all these 5 traits, it's not necessarily good or bad. It all depends on the situation you're in. Again, these are measurements that people use to select the right people for certain jobs. But depending, again, on the scenario, you don't always want someone to be super agreeable. You need someone to not be agreeable, right? And then so bringing up the point you're saying, if I'm wanting my partner to be able to just accept everything that I say, all of my suggestions to them, the feedback, the criticism, and I'm just saying, you just need to accept it, right? Well, no, I think there's a little bit of acknowledging that if my partner is lower on the openness scale, I need to accept and allow and give them the space needed, which in communication and conflict resolution, maybe that's giving them the time that they need to process through their emotions and not really wanting your partner to completely alter the way they see a situation right in the moment because you accept they're lower on the openness.
I have one more remark to make. I know we continue to go on, but I think your partner can feel the difference between when you're judging them for their tendencies, right? Like for that example, like you judge them for needing more time to process versus understanding that, respecting that, and accepting it and kind of working with it. And I was doing some text coaching with one of our clients yesterday about how to work through a little kind of challenge that they were having that day. And she could have gone on seeing her partner as, he is just this way, and so I don't even want to go to him and handle this. As opposed to come from a place of more love, acceptance, joy, and that will change your approach. And it actually, I got a text this morning, like it ended up being a really powerful conversation because she didn't go in with judgment and understanding each other more. So I just want to give that as an example. Your partner can definitely feel the difference.
Wow, that's really good. Yeah. Let your acceptance of the base personality traits of your partner determine the better approach. And the better that you approach them, the more space and acceptance that you give them, the more it allows for their attitude to turn into a tendency and then eventually turn into a change in personality.
Yes. So great episode here. Really hope you enjoyed this and it gave you some things to contemplate. Make sure you dive into our other resources. Watch our web classes, and those are all linked on our website as well. So if you want to go to meetthefreemans.com, and you can actually explore our course, the Communication Mastery Bundle. You can explore our sessions. You can explore our web classes. Make sure you dive further into the resources we have outside the podcast. And if you would just take 2 seconds to actually rate and review our podcast, that helps us get the message out there more. So go and give it 5 stars on whichever platform you're listening on. Write a sentence or 2 about why you enjoy it. And with that, we always look forward to hearing from you on Instagram. We will connect with you on the next episode.